1235, dealing with the Children's Health Insurance Program. Without objection, I will admit that. Seeing none. First item we have this morning is a hearing on Senate Bill 101, creating a drug abuse resistance education DARE educator position. And we'll start out with the revisor overview with David Weiss. David, are you on?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, David.
Okay.
If you want to go ahead, that'd be good.
Right. Thank you. David Weiss with the Revisor Statutes Office. Senate Bill 101 requires the Attorney General to appoint a statewide drug abuse resistance education, or a DARE educator, within the limits of appropriations and such additional staff as necessary to support the functions and responsibilities of the DARE educator. The bill further provides that the DARE educator shall provide instruction on drug abuse using the curriculum approved by the Attorney General. It includes content on fentanyl and other opioid drugs to students in public elementary and secondary schools. The educator shall report annually to the legislature on any modifications to the curriculum utilized by the Attorney General, and provide the names and addresses of public schools serviced by the program, and perform other services and provide material information as required to support the DARE program in Kansas. I can take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, David. Are there any questions? And we have Senator Clays and Senator Owens on WebEx. Do either one of you have a question?
No question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. We'll start out with proponents. First, the proponent is Randy Combs, DARE Coordinator, Office of the Attorney General. Randy, are you there?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Randy Combs, and I am a special agent with the Kansas Attorney General's Office. My primary job is statewide DARE coordinator. I appreciate the opportunity to testify as a proponent of SB 101. I have 40 years of law enforcement experience with 25 years working as a DARE officer and school resource officer. Many drug trends over those years have been the concern and topic of speaking to kids to get the word out and help them make good choices. Today, the nation is concerned with compelling cause about fentanyl. Truly, fentanyl can kill with the first pill taken. In 2023, DEA seized more than 80 million fentanyl-laced fake pills. In 2023, DEA seized more than 80 million fentanyl-laced fake pills and nearly 12,000 pounds of fentanyl powder. The 2023 seizures are equivalent to more than 390 million lethal doses of fentanyl. The latest DEA laboratory testing indicates 5 out of every 10 pills tested in 2024 contain a potentially deadly dose of fentanyl. These deadly pills and products are in Kansas and accessible to our youth, disguised as Percocet or Oxycontin, which we know youth use recreationally. The surge of fentanyl and other illicit drugs in our state, combined with the lack of information geared toward our youth, have resulted in 51 drug-related deaths of Kansas children under the age of 18 between the years of 2018 and 2022. 33 of those deaths were due to fentanyl specifically. Many high school and middle schools are fortunate to have a trained DARE officer or school resource officer who is working to get the critical information to youth in their community. But this bill really addresses the hundreds of middle schools and high schools in underserved and rural areas who don't have these trained professionals working in their schools. I have spoken personally to dozens of high school administrators across the state in both rural and urban areas who have indicated a need to have fentanyl and drug education assemblies brought to their schools. From speaking to these same school administrators, I've learned that high school students typically receive one lesson on substance use, during their entire 4 years of high school, which in practicality is usually accomplished in their freshman health class and is taught by a health or PE teacher. We can all agree that this isn't enough when we're dealing with an issue as deadly as fentanyl. The passage of SB 101 will fund and provide a trained educator for our state, ensuring fentanyl awareness and evidence-based curricula are available to any K through 12 school in need statewide. If passed, this legislation will make the DARE educator available to all school districts, but will particularly focus on underserved and rural schools without access to full-time school resource officers or certified DARE officers who can provide fentanyl education in their schools. The DARE educator will work with schools in need to host fentanyl education assemblies for students and even has the opportunity to share this information with parents and professionals who work with youth. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today, and both myself and Matt Bingesser, also with the Attorney General's office, are happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Committee, are there questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. I know DARE's been around for a long time, and I've seen it in my local area. I always took it that they did a very good job working with the local law enforcement in kind of covering these kind of areas. So I guess my question would be, what's going to be different with this law versus the way it is today in the coverage of that kind of stuff? Isn't that kind of a local law enforcement with the school system? You might respond to that.
Randy?
Thank you, Senator. That's a great question. Currently, we have 83 law enforcement agencies in the state of Kansas. And within those agencies, there's about 100 DARE officers serving about 150 school districts. We're looking at schools who aren't fortunate enough to have a trained DARE officer or school resource officer available to them. And that's what we're wanting to serve.
Other questions? Anyone online? Okay. Seeing none,
Senator, I have my hand raised, but I guess it's hard to see. This is Senator Petty.
Senator Petty, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I know from from past experience that some districts have made a decision that they don't feel that DARE provides us the services that they would like to see happen, and they have chosen to not be part of the DARE program. So when you talk about that there are 150 schools that are served, but there are schools that have decided not to participate. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. Thank you, Senator, for that question. We're not going to try to force this on anybody. This is strictly voluntarily, and we're available to those schools that would have us come in and present this information. We think it's extremely important, and we just want to get the word out that this is very deadly. But we're not going to, this isn't a mandatory thing. This is available to schools upon request.
And just as a follow-up, Mr. Chairman, I know that, so where is the funding for this?
I would defer that to Matt Bissinger from the attorney, also from the Attorney General's office.
Matt, if you can introduce yourself and answer that, please. Matt, we're not hearing you. You must be muted. Can you hear us, Matt?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we got you.
Okay,
Thank you.
excellent. Yeah, for some reason the unmute wouldn't work, but we're back now. Okay, I'm Matt Bingesser, the Administrative Counsel with the Office of the Attorney General. So regarding the question about funding, we are asking for about $110,000 plus or minus from state general funds. Our previous request from the previous legislative session was $300,000. We really worked the fiscal note down to ensure this program is budget efficient And we've also worked it out to the point where we are confident we're providing the program in an efficient and effective manner. We really would like to see this program be part of the Attorney General's office, and because we do think it will make a meaningful impact on the K-12 programs in public schools around the state of Kansas, especially in those school districts that don't have access to this program and want access, of which we have received many requests. So we are looking at receiving some SGF funding for this, but it's a minimal amount compared to what our previous ask was.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator,
is Matt testifying later? I'm sorry, I can't see the testimony that's coming up. Can I follow up with a question for him?
yes, you may.
Thank you. So Matt, I was looking at the bill, but I'm trying to understand. So this is a request to move the DARE educator to being in the Attorney General's office?
Right. Thank you,
Is this
Senator,
correct?
for that question. Senator, Chairman and Senator, so this request, we would actually create a new position called the statewide DARE educator. And this will supplement the programming that we already have in place. Randy is currently our part-time DARE coordinator, and his role is to educate law enforcement officers to provide the program in their communities. This educator position would be a full-time position at the Attorney General's office, a brand new position that would go to underserved school districts and provide services that are not yet available in their areas because there is no DARE officer to provide these services. We would, of course, if requested, consider providing these presentations and services to Johnson County, Wyandotte County, Sedgwick County, and other school districts in Leavenworth and whatnot if we had time in our schedule and the need was presented to us. And so we would, of course, accommodate as best we can the entire state. But our primary focus will be providing those services to school districts who do not have access to the program and want the access to the program.
So currently, their program is a decision at the local level as to whether they have it or not, and it's done as was mentioned earlier by Senator Fagg. It's done in conjunction with the local law enforcement. I know when I was teaching, that was the case in the Turner School District in conjunction with Kansas City, Kansas. And then there was a decision made that it was not really providing the resources that best address the needs. So this is creating a position in the Attorney General's office, but basically is going to be providing services to as you're saying, to underserved communities that don't have the resources. But you're saying could provide them other places, but it sounds like that would be nearly impossible.
Yeah. Senator, would you like a comment on that, or?
Yeah, you don't need to comment. I mean, is that?
Okay.
I'm sorry for the last comment, but for the
Yeah.
part about what this is actually doing, is that correct? I think you said that.
Yeah, your summary is more or less correct. I do believe there will be time in the schedule of the DARE educator to provide services to counties that do have access to it but want the fentanyl assemblies. That would be one of the primary focuses of the new position.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Also have a question from Senator Holscher. Senator Holscher, are you on?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Who do you have the question for?
I mean, it could be either Randy or the last conferee. I'm just curious, as this is a new position, is it modeled after other programs in other states? Or this kind of goes along with what Senator Petty was asking. I'm having a hard time kind of visualizing the implementation in terms of serving particular schools. So if you could help me out with that.
I could give comment to that, Senator. So primarily, any DARE material is proprietary, and an officer would have to go through a 2-week, 80-hour certification to give it. But DARE America saw the importance and saw how many people were dying from fentanyl. And so they have a fentanyl assembly geared toward middle school, high schools, and there's also a community assembly that's available specifically about fentanyl. And primarily, what we want is for that officer to go out and upon request, they can give that assembly to middle school, high school, and communities and get the dangers of fentanyl out there. DARES has come up with this assembly program, and I've actually given it to several high schools in Southwest Kansas, and it seems to be well received.
Okay, thank you for that.
Also, Senator Cluse is on, but he's not on WebEx. He's unable to get on there and unable to respond, but he has a questions. He says, if I can get my phone open. He wants to know if this applies to all schools, including public schools.
I can answer that, Mr. Chairman. So this bill would be exclusive to public schools and for being able to receive the service according to the language in the bill.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, Senator Fagg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I'm thinking about this and reading through this, my question is, was there a conversation with we all understand that this is a problem that needs to be addressed, but KBI got some FTEs last year to kind of work on fentanyl stuff, if I remember. And I'm wondering why that can't be worked through internally with the FTEs that they already have, either through the KBI or the Attorney General's office. I would think that'd be an effective way of trying to deter that up front. So I just wonder if you might comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for the question. This is Matt Bengesser, Administrative Counsel. So the KBI and the Attorney General's FTEs are exclusive of one another. Although we do have supervisory authority over the KBI, we do maintain separation of the FTEs and the supervision of the direct supervision of the staff. But the KBI is supportive of this bill and testified in the previous integration of it, and would, of course, be enthusiastic about working with us on this, but the FTE would likely need to be stationed at the Office of the Attorney General, where the DARE program is currently assigned to by a statute.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Matthew and Randy. Our next proponent is Andrew and Rhonda Burris, founders of the Cruise for Life Foundation. Andrew and Rhonda, are you on WebEx?
Good morning. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can. Go ahead,
right.
Please.
Thank you very much. This is regarding our testimony for Senate Bill 101 in response to the DARE program educators position. Chairperson and members of the committee, we thank you, first of all, for allowing us to speak to you. Again, our names are Andy and Rhonda Burris, and we come very humbly to you. On January 18th, 2023, my wife Rhonda and I lost our beautiful son, Nicholas Cruz Burris, due to fentanyl poisoning. Cruz is unfortunately now part of the statistics that Mr. Combs had just described to you shortly ago. Our testimony begins with Cruz. He was a vibrant 15-year-old boy. And like many children his age, Cruz was curious about many things in life. And with the evolution of our social media platforms, including Snapchat, he decided to answer an advertisement from a local drug dealer. I define them as predators. As a prominent leader of his friend's circle, Cruz thought he would venture where none of his friends had gone before. On Tuesday evening, January 17th, 2023, a little over 2 years ago, he planned with the drug dealer to deliver a pill to Cruz in exchange for $20. Sometime around 11 p.m., Cruz met him in front of our house to make the deal and purchase what Cruz thought was a Percocet pill. As Rhonda and I slept, Cruz sat on his bed and FaceTimed a couple of his closest friends to share the experience of him getting high. As Cruz ingested this pill, his friends witnessed the tragic events that came shortly after. Cruz's friends witnessed, 1, Cruz ingesting the illicit drug. 2, Cruz stopped breathing. And 3, Cruz falling to his side until his death. Rhonda went to wake him up for school on Wednesday morning, January 18th, 2023 at 6:30 in the morning and found him dead in bed. Rhonda and I have discussed with our children the dangers of taking drugs, including having our daughter JC and Cruz watch the news with us as we view the dangers of taking illicit pills and how people are dying in our country, including children. Fentanyl is our new epidemic. Rhonda and I thought nothing like this could ever happen to our family, especially being here in Kansas. We are now living one of our worst nightmares, one of our real nightmares. You see, I remember the DARE program growing up. I remember the Just Say No campaign. I remember MAD. They did influence my thought patterns as a teenager growing up in the 80s. And I believe it can influence children today in a very positive way. We pray that Senate Bill 101 gets passed. I believe that fentanyl and drug educator should be our state and country's focus. And I can't understand why it was ever discontinued as priority in our schools. If our state and country focus more on this national crisis, our beautiful boy may be alive. Please look for the statewide DARE coordinator and pass this bill. I'm going to now pass this over to my wife, Rhonda.
Hi, good morning. I just want to reiterate what Andy had talked about with Cruz and his friends. Cruz was on the FaceTiming his two friends, Garrett and Nolan. You know, they watched the whole thing. They saw he was getting a little not responsive, so they texted his sister, who was asleep at the time, and obviously they asked her to go check on Cruz, but you know, she couldn't, she was asleep. If those boys would have known about fentanyl, had ever heard about fentanyl, they would have called us. You know, they would have really known the seriousness of the conversation. But in past history, nobody just dies from taking one pill. You know, he thought he was taking a Percocet. There shouldn't have been any issues. So I think it's really important to educate these kids. And I know we're getting a lot more awareness out there, but some kids still don't get that education. And I think if our state can't do that, I don't know who can. I think our state needs to get something in place. And to me, should have already been in place 2-3 years ago, to talk about fentanyl, to talk about these drugs that are coming into our country. You know, it's $20 for a high. A lot of kids have $20 bills sitting around. I do also want to tag this onto the Good Samaritan law. I think, you know, during the DARE program, when you're talking about, you know, fentanyl and you're probably going to die, you know, if it's the first time ever taking fentanyl, you haven't done other drugs, you're probably going to pass away unless you're with somebody who understands what's happening. But if they're taking drugs too, are they going to want to call into the police? Well, the Good Samaritan law protects them and allows them to call into the police, call an ambulance, and get somebody there. So, you know, there's a lot of information that we need to give these kids. And that's all I have to say about the DARE program. It needs to get implemented. Something has to get out there for these kids because they are dying.
We thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for being here this morning. We really appreciate it. Committee, are there any questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to say we are all truly sorry for your loss. That has to be unimaginable. What I was wondering is that did his school have a DARE program at the time, and has the local Board of Education discussed the need for DARE?
Currently, and when our children were going through their elementary, middle school, and high school does not have a DARE program. In fact, I ran for school board in 2023, unfortunately lost, because that was my biggest push to get in our education system with the DARE program. And I also would like to say that on behalf of Randy Combs, volunteer to go out and create assemblies for the high schoolers. Those are very highly effective. And I believe the educator position could help respond and create a platform to get these out, this message out. We piggyback with the DEA, and they have the One Pill Kill program. But as we all know that, we all have budgets, as well as the DEA. And the assemblies that we've attended and participated in, I can tell you that they were very, very highly effective, and we just need to get that message out, and as a solid drumbeat until this crisis might ever go away.
And that's true. And you could usually find people to come give the presentations. Andy worked with several people with presentations. The Wyandotte police came for free. The Wyandotte with the dog came for free. Everybody came for free. There was not a cost to it. It was just finding the ability to open it up and get the message that assembly would be had there. And it was, really well received.
Thank you. Other questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I join Senator Fagg in grieving for your loss. That's got to be something I couldn't imagine happening. But my question's related, but a little bit sidetracked. As far as the dealer, do we know anything about the dealer? Was the person ever caught, prosecuted?
Indeed, thank God for our state's AG and the KBI. They were able to open their investigation and crack the iPhone our son had with his login information to Snapchat. Snapchat was the avenue and provided the evidence to be able to apprehend and hold Mr. Torrin Bauman in the Leavenworth County Sheriff's Department jail. And most recently, when was
Is it January 23rd or something?
April? He was just convicted, and he took a plea of 13 years for selling a illicit drug that led to death of our child. So in that aspect, again, I thank our AG and KBI, as well as the special service, as they were the huge members, and that's one predator that's now off the street for at least 13 years or so.
Yeah.
Senator Peck.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have an additional question. I don't know for certain what all the DARE program includes, but no matter if this legislation goes forward or not, I would think our DARE officers should certainly communicate to our students the reality of being a pusher, a drug dealer, and how they can harm their own life going forward, as well as the fact that they could end up causing the death of one of their classmates. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? Okay, next we'll have Lieutenant Greg Wellion with the Johnson County Sheriff's Office. Greg, are you there? Greg, if you're speaking, you must be muted. We're not hearing anything. You don't see him there? Okay, we're not seeing him on WebEx. We'll move on. Next, we'll have Representative Robin Essex. Robin, are you on WebEx?
I am here. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, please.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Billinger and committee. Just wanted to hop on here quickly. Thank you for letting me provide testimony a little bit late. I can tell you that Lieutenant Wallian is out busy right now with the snowstorm and assisting people around Johnson County. So my apologies for him not being able to be here. He's very passionate about this and has always been by our side as we have had these hearings. So Just wanted to share a little bit of a background from someone whose husband is a middle school teacher in the Blue Valley School District, so Johnson County, and the disconnect in drug education that's happening right now. He was involved with teaching Project Alert and DARE at some point, and it just got bounced around from teachers were too busy. It went to counselors. Counselors didn't have time to do it. It went to SROs. And it kind of just, from school to school, it's super inconsistent. And I will tell you, they're lucky if they have one lesson for their entire time when they're in school. I know private schools, it's not as urgent because they have up to, I talked to a few private school teachers and they're getting 10 sessions for 1 year, which is great. 10 sessions is way better than one. And I think the disconnect here is this intermittent abbreviated lessons, they're not working, and our kids are not getting the education that they need. Obviously, as we heard from the Burris family and the heartbreaking story of their son, one pill can kill is not working. So cutting the pill in half is not going to make a difference. And, you know, it's just a matter of consistent, carefully crafted education. And this is not the DARE of the past. Now, I know there have been negative comments before. We brought this through the legislature last year. It passed the House twice, and it actually passed our House Education Committee unanimously. And I will just share that the DARE, I call this DARE 2.0 because fentanyl is a new threat. It's something we haven't faced before. And we understand that alcohol and vaping and marijuana and all those things are still out there and they're still a problem. And that still is addressed. But the updates with fentanyl have really, man, I feel like this is an urgency, even an emergency to get this out to our kids. I don't have to give you statistics. It's in my testimony. But at Johnson County, they said fentanyl-related deaths among children increased more than 30-fold in the last 10 years. This is not going away, and we've got to hit this head on. So I just want to share that this is not a mandate, so it's not something that we would push on any school boards. If they're not wanting this program, they want to do a different resource, that is fine too. It's just that we need one central location to say, oh, we don't have anybody here on staff that's trained with DARE. We can get help from the state, make a phone call, and it's done. So I do have a stack of DARE essays, I would say, from children who have gone through the program recently. I would say I have about 100 of them in my office. And if you want to go through and read what DARE has done in their lives, that will give you a great indication that this is working. It's not the DARE of the past. And I would be so proud of our state if we could jump on board and be the leader in this and make sure that every school has an opportunity and they have one location to go to if they want to bring this to their program. So, and I just want to reiterate that I've talked to PTO presidents. I've got emails from parents, victims' families. Law enforcement is behind this. School counselors who are begging for help. They all support this, and I would urge your support as well. So I would absolutely stand for questions.
Are there questions for the representative? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, thank you for your presentation. How do they, if you have a DARE program in your school, how do whoever's in charge of DARE, how do they get their information, or how are they trained for that job?
All right, great question. I appreciate it. I know the Attorney General's office can give you details on that. I know that they have free of charge, is what I understand. Now, if I'm wrong, please correct me. Curriculum, and they pass that training on to a counselor, a resource officer, whoever's going to take on the training for that district or for that school, and it's available through a phone call. Just want to verify that's correct from Randy or Matt.
I could speak to that if you would allow me to.
Please.
So if your agency, law enforcement agency, and school partner, and they decide that they want the DARE program, then they send an individual to a 2-week, 80-hour training. And there is curriculum provided, and that officer is trained to give curriculum K through 12. The lion's share of DARE is our core curriculum, which is taught in the 5th or 6th grade. Now, this particular bill is not focused on bringing a K through 12 curriculum. I mean, it can be taught to middle school and high school primarily, but this is a program where we can come to a high school or middle school at the request of that school and give about a 45 minute to an hour assembly presentation and give specific information about the dangers of fentanyl. You know, the mixture, the fentanyl, you have no idea how much fentanyl is in a particular pill. You might have enough to kill 8 people. You may have enough to kill 1 person, and you have no idea what part of that pill. So cutting it in half doesn't work. A lot of times, giving naloxone, Narcan won't save the person. They have to give several doses because the fentanyl is so concentrated. And so this particular thing is not, we're not talking about bringing an entire DARE program to schools. We're talking about underserved schools or schools that don't have this available. They don't have an SRO. They don't have a DARE officer. And we would be willing to, at their request, go to that school and give this 45 minute to an hour assembly to get the word out about the dangers of fentanyl. I hope that makes things clearer.
Okay, thank you. Senator Petty has a question. Senator Petty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Chair, sorry, I was on a committee earlier. Thank you, Representative Estes, for being here today. It does sound like this bill isn't doing what has just been alluded to, because the bill doesn't talk really about assemblies. It does talk about a curriculum, and I know, thank you for providing the information about the training that goes on with the 2 weeks and 80-hour training for officers in the communities that have a DARE program, just like was mentioned for the Blue Valley School District. So I'm a little, I mean, I guess we could say we're definitely, if this was funded, committing more money to providing information in communities about the deadliness of fentanyl. But I'm having a hard time understanding how this bill specifically addresses what you just talked about, because it really, I mean, it does mention programs. It also, just as you said, is an expansion of what DARE would be doing, because DARE currently, like you mentioned, is the curriculum for 4th, 5th, or 6th grade. And that would not be what you're talking about. So can you expand for how this bill addresses what you were just mentioning as far as the presentations within communities?
So
Randy?
how I would speak to that is, if you have a DARE officer or an SRO, they have the capability to bring a trained individual to talk specifically about this. We are trying to target schools who do not have a DARE officer, who do not have a school resource officer, and they want this information. We're not trying to expand the DARE program. I mean, I work on that all the time, but this is specifically talking about bringing the dangers of fentanyl, and we're specifically trying to target schools who do not have those resources, and we can bring an expert in. I would also like to note that currently we're using a DARE lesson that has been put out by DARE America, but the bill language gives us the ability if something else better comes out, we're not stuck on the DARE curriculum. That's currently what we would use and what's available. But if there's something better out there, we would bring that. I know the word DARE is used in this, but the important thing about this is we want to get the dangers of fentanyl to schools. And there are schools out there that do not have the resources, agencies that don't have the resources to hire their own DARE officer. And we simply want to get the word out, the dangers of fentanyl out there. And you know, that's how I would say that this is supposed to work.
Just as a follow-up, Mr. Chairman, so Randy, I appreciate that explanation, but if you are using the DARE logo and referring to the DARE program and materials, isn't there don't you have sorry for that noise, isn't there a responsibility to maintain using the curriculum that's provided by DARE, and that officers have gone through with this would seem to be I think you're right. I mean, I believe what you said about the assemblies. It sounded like that's within the DARE training, but you just now said if there was different information, more information outside of DARE that you could bring it in, but is that really possible when you're using the DARE logo?
So that's a great question, Senator. Because DARE America saw the importance and saw how many kids are dying from this, the DARE fentanyl program is not covered under the same proprietary rules. They have opened that up to where any trained certified law enforcement officer, even if they're not a certified DARE officer, can present the fentanyl assemblies, just the fentanyl assemblies. And so DARE, because they saw that this was such an important topic and that kids were dying all over America, that's not covered under the same copyright and proprietary rules. And so the fentanyl assemblies can be given by any certified officer. And that's what we're talking about.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing
Chairman
none,
Billinger. Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
May I add one more comment? Sorry about jumping in there. I will share with you a difference from the bill last year, and maybe this will help with some accountability piece to this. Senator Petty asked for reporting requirements when it was heard in a hearing last year in the Education Committee. And that is definitely something that we have added to make sure that the program goes back to the legislature and says, this is how many schools are getting this DARE education. This is how many rallies we've done. This is how many people we've trained. So with the reporting mechanism, I think that will bring more accountability to the program, and then the legislature can make the decision whether it's working or not.
Thank you. Was there any other questions? Seeing none, I'll point out we also had 3 written only. Are there any opponents online? Seeing none, any neutrals? Seeing none, we'll close our hearing on Senate Bill 101. Thank you all for being here today, and Andrew and Rhonda, I also would like to extend my condolences. Let's move on now. We're going to have a hearing on Senate Bill 214, enacting the Attorney Training Program for Rural Kansas Act to provide financial assistance to lawyers and law students who practice law in rural areas. We'll start out with an overview with the reviser, Tamara Lawrence. Tamara, are you online?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As the chairman said, I'm Chairman Lawrence with the Revisor of Statutes Office, and Senate Bill 214 would enact the Attorney Training Program for Rural Kansas Act. 2 loan programs would be created under this act, one for law students and the other for already licensed attorneys. Under both programs, the loan recipient would agree to practice law in rural Kansas. I will say these programs are similar to the program for medical students and medical residents, and also the veterinary training program for rural Kansas. So first, I'm going to talk about the provisions of the bill that impact both programs and then provide the specifics of each program. So sections 1, 2, and 5 apply to both programs. Section 1 provides definitions for relevant terms used in the act. The only one I want to specifically note for you is the definition of rural or rural community. It would mean any county other than Douglas, Johnson, Sedgwick, Shawnee, and Wyandotte. Section 2 of the bill would establish an advisory committee that would coordinate both programs, and that committee may also adopt rules and regulations to implement and administer the programs. You can see the membership of the committee on page 2 of the bill. Section 5 would establish the Attorney Training Program for Rural Kansas Fund. This fund would be administered by the judicial administrator, and monies in the fund could only be expended for the student loans and student loan repayment as provided in the act. So now about each program within the act. Section 3 would establish the Law Student Training and Loan Program for rural Kansas. This program would be administered by the Advisory Committee in coordination with Washburn University for Washburn law students and the University of Kansas for KU law students. Under this program, each law school could enter into program agreements with qualified students. And subject to appropriations, each student that enters into an agreement would receive a loan of up to $30,000 per year for not more than 3 years. The loan would cover the costs of tuition, books, supplies, and other school expenses. If the student satisfies the obligation of the program, the loan provided to the student would be deemed satisfied and forgiven. To qualify for the program, a student would be required to complete a law degree at the law school, complete all required training and classes, complete an externship and mentoring requirement with an approved licensed attorney in a rural community. They would also have to agree to engage in the full-time practice of law in a rural community. This commitment would be for 1 year for every year the student received the loan. And finally, the student would have to repay the loan if they failed to engage in the full-time practice of law as required. This program would also require the dean of both law schools to annually submit a report on the program to the legislative committees on judiciary. So section 4 of the bill would establish the other program contained in the act, and that's the Attorney Training and Loan Repayment Program for rural Kansas. This program would be administered by the Office of Judicial Administration in coordination with the Advisory Committee. Under this program, the state would pay all or part of the educational loans of eligible rural attorneys who participate in the program. Subject to appropriations and the determination of the Advisory Committee, the amount of financial assistance each year could not exceed $20,000, and the total assistance could not exceed $100,000, and assistance could be provided for a maximum of 5 years. To qualify for this program, an attorney would be required to apply for the program, hold a law degree from an accredited institution, be licensed to practice law in Kansas and be in good standing. They would have to have outstanding student loan debt, reside in a rural community, and be engaged in the practice of law in a rural community. The program would require participants to enter into an agreement, and the Office of Judicial Administration would be required to report to the Legislative Budget Committee and the legislative committees on judiciary on this program. I will note there are no appropriations contained in this bill, and the bill would take effect on July 1 upon publication in the statute book, and I will be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Tamara. Questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Revisor Lawrence, I have seen you operate in a lot of settings. I must commend you on maintaining your train of thought and cool as you dealt with some distractions apparently behind you and underneath of you as you were talking. Some of the committee members weren't watching the screen like I were, so they have no idea what I'm talking about. But that's all I had, Mr. Chairman. Don't really have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You almost saw both of my children at some point. So
Senator Fagan, did you have?
Yeah,
Senator Fagan.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation, Tamara. When you say a student loan, it's not under the student loan program. This is a loan from the state. Let's start with that question first.
Tamara?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for the program for lost students, they would receive a loan to cover the cost of going to school while they're in school. The program for existing or currently practicing attorneys, it would be assistance to help them repay loans that they accrued while they were receiving their education.
Okay, now, is it the state that's making, who's making the loan, the state or the federal student loan program?
So if it's for the lost students, that money would come from the state under this program.
Okay, if I may follow up.
Yes.
So who actually collects the loan? Who, they're going to sign an actual loan at the state? Let's say the guy goes to school for a year or two and doesn't complete, and the loan's out there. What does the state do to, who's in charge of collecting these loans?
The program for the lost students is administered both by the advisory committee and either Washburn or KU, depending on which school the lost student attends.
Okay, and I'm just wondering how accountable is that group? Do they just, if it comes out, they just wipe it off if the guy doesn't pay, or do they pursue the debt if it's a student loan itself? So that's what I was trying to get at.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, it does say that upon satisfaction of all obligations under the program and the program agreement, the student would have to sign this agreement. The loans provided would be deemed satisfied and forgiven.
Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And along with Senator Peck, Tamara, I did notice that you were exercising great authority there in your role as mother and as a legislative advisor here. So good job. My question goes to I'm a little unsure. So it's the $20,000. Is that pertaining to just the Kansas Rural Attorney Loan Repayment Program, or is that also the student program?
Thank you, Senator. So the $20,000 for each year is for the licensed attorney program. For the law students, the amount of the loan could be up to $30,000.
Thank you. And is the student program the attorney one is up to 5 years. Is the student one just 4 or 3? I'm not sure which is. How long is it for?
It is for 3 years, which is typically the length of a law school education.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Tamara. We'll move on to proponents. We'll start out with Justice K.J. Wall, the Kansas Supreme Court. KJ, are you on?
I am, Chairman. Can you hear me?
We sure can. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. And I know we are short on time, and I think our written submissions have demonstrated the severity of the attorney shortage in rural parts of our state, the significant role that tuition cost and existing student loan debt serves in terms of a barrier to recruiting and retaining attorneys in those rural areas, and that we can effectively address that issue through legislative models that already exist in other professions in our state that are designed to recruit and retain physicians and large animal veterinary practitioners in rural parts of the state. Briefly, again, I know we're short on time. I just wanted to mention why I think this is an important issue for our state. And there are at least 3 reasons. One is economic. We need an adequate level of attorneys to support the businesses, large and small, in our rural communities. There are significant and complex operations throughout our state, particularly in agriculture and energy sectors, that need this legal representation for acquisitions, expansions, contracts, and for succession planning for farming operations. And having that local attorney assures that you will have somebody that understands your operations better, understands the dynamics of the regional economies, and understands the local jury pools. And they can provide services at a less expensive rate and more efficiently than having to turn to larger cities. These individuals, these attorneys are also operating small businesses. They are employers in the community. And those that stay in our rural communities very frequently return their investment into other businesses. Besides the economic advantages of ensuring rural recruitment in the legal profession in our state, these attorneys provide value to the community. If you look across the rural counties in our state, at critical access hospitals, local school boards that may be financially strapped, you will frequently see your local attorneys serving on those boards, guiding those organizations to ensure that they remain anchors of the community. And finally, and I think it's an issue unique to this profession, is ensuring that we have adequate numbers of attorneys throughout our state helps us fulfill the constitutional duty to ensure that the right to counsel is fulfilled in those cases where the parties have a right to counsel, which includes the right to have an attorney appointed to them. Our judges, our local judges, depend on local attorneys to take those appointments to fulfill that constitutional obligation. And right now they are completely strapped and having to find very creative ways to fulfill that obligation. But I thank you for your time, and I'm welcome to answer other questions, but I know there are other proponents.
I think we're going to wait until the end for questions so we can get through all the opponents. We have quite a few. So next we'll have, yes, thank you, KJ. Next we'll have Dr. Julianne Mazachek, president of Washburn University. Are you?
Hello. Good morning, Senator Billinger and the committee. Thank you for letting me present today. I'm Julianne Mazachek, and I'm the president of Washburn University. We do have one of the state's 2 law schools located on our campus. Appreciate the opportunity to speak today in support of Senate Bill 214. Washburn Law currently and has for a number of years offered a comprehensive rural law program. A summary of our program is attached to my testimony. Washburn and Kansas are leaders in rural law. Other states look to us for guidance about how to set up a comprehensive and effective rural law program. As you are likely aware, the shortage of attorneys, and actually as already has been said, in rural Kansas is alarming. We know attorneys in rural areas provide not only legal advice to individual client families, but also to their towns, often serving as a prosecutor or defense attorney, while maintaining a private practice to provide legal services and legal advice on land transfers or estate planning, among a host of other matters. Additionally, they often serve in civic, religious, or community groups and are upstanding, engaged citizens who raise their families in rural areas. This proposed loan program will further facilitate our already robust efforts to place more law students in rural areas and should incentivize and encourage more law graduates to choose to practice law in rural areas by providing financial assistance to attorneys practicing law in those areas. We believe the impact of this program will be practically immediate and will help graduates to choose rural law practice upon graduation. Washburn is ready to implement this bill as quickly as possible so the most rural attorneys can take advantage and we can help our great state of Kansas meet this need. And I'm pleased to answer any questions and thank you for allowing my testimony.
Thank you, Julianne. Next we will have Ann Sagan, Board of Indigenous Defense. Ann, welcome committee.
Thank you, members of the committee, Chair Billinger, and thank you for the opportunity to testify on this bill today. My name is Ann Sagan. I am the Director of Special Projects at the State Board of Indigenous Defense Services. I also serve as a member of the Kansas Rural Justice Initiative Committee. Our agency provides counsel to all adult Kansans who are facing felony charges but can't afford an attorney. And we do this through our public defender offices and also through our assigned counsel program. Most of Kansas's rural areas do not have a dedicated public defender office and are served entirely by the assigned counsel program, through which BIDS pays private attorneys to take criminal cases. But unfortunately, as you know, rural Kansas is facing an attorney shortage, and this shortage will increase in the coming years as more and more attorneys retire and rural legal communities shrink. In my role as Director of Special Projects, I'm involved in our agency's attorney recruitment efforts. And in my experience, new lawyers who have just graduated law school are choosing often urban and suburban areas to start their careers. It's difficult to recruit new lawyers to our semi-rural and rural offices. It's also difficult to recruit experienced attorneys to move to those areas to join our offices. Experienced attorneys are necessary to take high-level cases and mentor and supervise new attorneys. Unfortunately, many attorneys in rural areas are facing retirement, and within 5 to 10 years, the experience level of rural attorneys may be hollowed out. From a recruiting standpoint, BIDS will benefit from the implementation of both of these incentive programs outlined in the bill. The Law Student Training and Loan Program for rural Kansas focuses on law students who are starting their career and determining where to put down their roots. And the Attorney Training and Loan Repayment Program for rural Kansas focuses on attorneys who are already licensed, may have significant experience, but need extra incentive to move their practice and their families to a rural community. Rural areas can utilize both of these two complementary programs to draw new attorneys and experienced attorneys to their communities. It's not unrealistic to say that in the coming years, we are facing a crisis of rural criminal defense representation. The lack of rural attorneys represents a looming problem as we face the possibility that we simply will not have enough defense attorneys in rural areas to represent criminal defendants. In most of rural Kansas, there's no public defender office, there's no backstop to local counsel shortages. As shortages worsen, defendants could face wait times to receive counsel, or cases could be dismissed. This has already happened in Oregon, where the Associated Press reported that almost 300 cases in the Portland area were dismissed in 2022 because there simply were not enough public defenders to take the cases. Indigent defense counsel is essential to keeping our justice system working, but the rural attorney shortage doesn't just affect public defense. A shortage of attorneys impacts everyone, including prosecutor offices, which also face staffing difficulties, to small businesses, family, and agriculture, which all rely on the availability of attorneys in rural areas. Currently, BIDS deals with attorney shortages by paying attorneys to travel hundreds of miles to represent defendants in rural areas that lack counsel. For example, one private attorney who takes BIDS cases may spend up to 5 hours on the road to reach a rural courthouse. She spent 33 nights in hotels over the course of the year as she navigated her many driving hours and courthouse schedules. It's a costly solution to the problem of rural attorney shortages, as the state of Kansas pays appointed counsel for their travel time and many miles on the road. And attorneys who live hours away aren't able to meet with clients as frequently, and they aren't able to take as many cases as local counsel. This current practice of paying attorneys to travel to rural areas is a short-term, not a long-term solution. We must find a way to recruit attorneys to live and work in our rural areas, not just commute there. And because of this, we support SB 214 as an important pathway to bring much-needed attorneys to our state's rural communities. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify, and I'm available to take questions.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Ashley Kumea. I'm sure
Como, yes.
go ahead. I'm sure I said that wrong.
Thank you, Chairman Billinger and members of the committee. My name is Ashley Como, and I'm an attorney in Plainville, Kansas. I'm here today on behalf of the Kansas Women Attorneys Association, or KWA, to provide testimony in support of Senate Bill 214. I currently serve on the KWA Council with my district representing 21 counties across Northwest Kansas. In the written testimony submitted by KWA, you'll find details about our mission to support and advance women in the legal profession. At its core, KWA's strength lies in connecting attorneys across the state. Practicing law is challenging in any setting, but the difficulties are amplified in rural areas. These relationships and mentorships are invaluable to rural attorneys, many of whom practice in isolation. KWA provides a much needed support system, allowing us to share information, ask questions, and refer clients when necessary. Today, I think it would be most meaningful to share my own experience, challenges, and what it would mean for my rural community if I had to leave. 10 years ago, I moved home to Plainville, leaving a mid-sized firm in Kansas City. My husband and I chose to raise our children near family, just 2 blocks from the Catholic school that our son attends, and a half block from the public school that provides us with daycare for our daughter. I serve on several committees and boards, and as a 5th-generation Rooks County resident, I feel deeply connected to my hometown and community, all reasons why it's great to be home. I work for Jeter Law Firm out of Hayes, but I also work from a satellite office in Plainville. I am the only attorney who has provided services in Plainville for the last 5 years. My husband is a paramedic for both Ellis County and Rooks County EMS, services that both struggle to fill their shifts. Outside of our full-time jobs, we also own several businesses. One such venture is Brandt's Meat Market, which was one of the 8 wonders of Kansas commerce. We were able to purchase that business with Network Kansas e-community funds. With another company, we have renovated and filled 3 vacant properties in downtown Plainville, one of which was a Kansas Department of Commerce HEAL grant project. Through our full-time jobs and our businesses, we spend most of our days, nights, and weekends purposefully investing in our community. We love what we do, even when it's hard. And my story is not unique. As Justice Wall alluded to, many rural attorneys are committed to their small towns in similar ways. When I left Kansas City, though, I not only took a pay cut, I also accepted that my long-term earning potential would be limited. I was a recipient of funds from the Rural Opportunity Zone program, which initially helped me manage my law school debt. While I'm grateful for that assistance, the funds were spread over 5 years and barely kept the interest on my loans at bay. Honestly, ROZ is great for tackling undergraduate debt, but professional debt really needs something more. Moving home has certainly benefited my community, my family, my children, but I want to emphasize that it has not been financially beneficial for me. Long-term, my husband and I will face tough choices. What worries me most is the tax bill that I'll face at the end of my income-driven repayment plan for my student debt, where my forgiven student debt will be treated as income, an amount probably more than double my current income. Of course, I'll plan responsibly for that looming tax burden, but it means we may have to leave rural Kansas when our children are older. I may have to consider higher paying jobs in an urban area, or accept an offer to work remotely for better pay, jobs that I've already been asked to consider, and so far I've declined. Technology in the legal profession has dramatically changed since I moved home in 2015, and the legal field is more adaptable to remote work than ever before, but that would mean one less attorney is providing local services. I don't want to leave my clients behind. Many already travel an hour or more to see me, and asking them to find a new attorney even further away feels like too great a burden. Instead, I'm here on behalf of the Kansas Women Attorneys Association, myself, my clients, and my children to advocate for the constant improvement of the law and the legal profession. If passed, Senate Bill 214 will have an immediate impact, not only for young attorneys, but also for many of us who are already out here in the trenches. Senate Bill 214 would make practicing law in rural areas more attractive and financially sustainable. Ensuring that attorneys choose rural and then continue to practice in rural communities is key to the administration of justice in Kansas. We fully support passage of Senate Bill 214. Thank you, and I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Ashley. Next, we'll have Angelia Meyer.
Hi,
Angela,
thank you.
are you
Thank
on?
you. Yes, I am. Thank you for allowing me to testify. I too am a member of the Rural Justice Initiative Committee. I am vice president of the Kansas Bar Association and a small town lawyer in Pittsburgh, Kansas for the last 15 years. I submitted written testimony, so I'm going to touch on a few key points. I believe Joe Molina on behalf of the KBA also submitted written testimony. It's not uncommon in my law practice to field 30 to 50 new calls for clients. The majority of my practice is family law, including work with children in the child needed care or foster care system. There are simply not enough attorneys in Southeast Kansas. I started my practice in Fort Scott, where there are even fewer attorneys now. The reports that were issued by the committee do a fantastic job of illustrating the problem, but in some ways, those numbers also reflect that those lawyers are judges, prosecutors, in-house attorneys, and not necessarily those that render private services like criminal defense work or family law. It's not uncommon in our Crawford County District Court for entire days of our domestic docket of divorce and custody cases to not have a single lawyer involved in the cases because there's not enough of us take on the load. Additionally, PFA dockets where people are fearful for their safety or the safety of their children are predominantly, despite Kansas Legal Services, also pro se where there aren't lawyers involved. That means on those dockets, we have victims of domestic violence being required to question their abusers, abusers through the process allowed and rightfully so to be able to question the victim. But that puts both sides of that in a very uncomfortable and sometimes unsafe position. That puts a greater burden on our courthouse security as well. Everyone, no doubt, should be entitled to equal access. But in the process where one side can afford a lawyer or called and got someone quicker, it means that the process doesn't work as efficiently or sometimes to a disadvantage to the other party because they don't have the expertise that lawyers have. Justice Wall talked about the economic development and the civic development. I'm one of those young lawyers that came home. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh. I came back to the area and I was inundated with requests to be on every board. I serve on our local hospital foundation board. I'm 11 years running of being in charge of the largest festival in Crawford County that's all sponsored and donated by the community. And a lot of these organizations suffer when there's not enough young professionals to step up and be involved. That population is also aging where we're seeing events shrink, activities change in a way that's not fruitful for our community. At the same time, though, I step up. A lot of my peers do the same thing and we're involved, but we can only donate so much time and keep up with the load. I too am also a second business owner. I own and operate and employ at least 2 college students from Pittsburgh State every year in my office. I have a full-time staff person. I try to hire and keep as much local employment as possible. And then I've opened a second business. Tons of our lawyers in the area have cattle businesses or other retail businesses that contribute not only to the sales tax base, but also to the income tax paid in. We truly are those in our community that become jacks of all trades. We help with whatever aspect of law we possibly can because we know it's too far of a drive to travel 2 to 3 hours to find a lawyer in a metro area. Ultimately, I think the bill is a fantastic foundation to recruit lawyers to come to rural areas, but that also comes with a need for the wraparound programs that go with that. That's why organizations like QA and the Bar Association, even local bar associations are stepping up because we will help provide the network, the support, the logistics advice that younger lawyers need to know how to set up QuickBooks, how to run a law practice, the things that you really don't learn until you're in the middle of running your own business or being a lawyer in someone else's practice for the first time. These organizations will do a fantastic job of supporting the program, but at the end of the day, it takes the financial burden off of the students. That's what drives them to a rural area and lets it be feasible. I was lucky to be able to come home, but I also scrimped and saved and set a goal to pay all of my private student loans off before I was 40. I had no help. there wasn't a program available to me. So with that, I would strongly encourage the committee and support Senate Bill 214, and we'll stand for questions with the others.
Thank you, Angela. Next, we'll have Susan Richmeyer, Fenny County Attorney. Susan, are you on?
I am on, if you can hear me.
Yes.
I will not reiterate a lot of the things that everyone else has said. Thank you for allowing me to testify today in support of Senate Bill 214. As Finney County Attorney, we have run short of attorneys in my prosecutor's office for the last 12 years. We still remain short. And I've taken it upon myself to do a lot of recruiting over the last 3 years and working with our Kansas law schools as well as those out of state. This bill would provide great supplementation and recruiting support for those of us that are seeking attorneys in general, no matter where they're going to fit into our community. And I just want to give you an example of something that happened recently in my judicial district, which is the 25th in Garden City. So it includes Scott City, Lakin, Tribune, Leota, I'm trying to think the last one, Hamilton County, Syracuse. So those 6 counties in our judicial district, we have approximately 24 practicing lawyers, some of which are working in my office. 2 of those counties don't have attorneys at all. There are 3 of those counties that have 1 attorney that's practicing outside of a prosecutor's office. And then those, we have 3 that are ready to retire. They're all in their mid-70s. So they're still taking on cases. They're still doing cases to support their communities because they're the only ones there. And they're the only ones that are, willing to step up and come out to those communities. So we face a really hard recruiting challenge to get people in those areas. We recently had, in fact, it was just on Tuesday, the governor announced a new judge that was appointed into our district. There were 5 candidates that were submitted to the judge, and each one of those 5, if chosen, would have created a really big hole in our justice system. So one was a bids attorney, and she did bids work for criminal defense. One did the conflicts panels, and she's a family law attorney in town. And so she would have then been taken out of one of the 3 attorneys that practice family law in our judicial district. If I would have been chosen, then there was no one really to take my position as county attorney. And if one of my deputies were chosen, then I don't have anyone to fill their positions either. So none of the choices, they're all good choices, but none of them were good choices because of the hole they would leave behind. And those things matter. And loan repayment matters to these students because they're coming out with hundreds of thousands of dollars of loans that will take them years to pay back. And when they have a choice to take a 6-figure income in a metro area versus a 5-figure, mid-5-figure income in a smaller area because our local attorneys can't afford to bring on board someone at a rate that is competitive with the metro area, these things would mean a lot to all of us and all of our communities in rural Kansas. And that's why I'm here to support the bill of 214 and that loan repayment program, especially because our Kansas schools just can't fill all of those holes themselves. They're not capable of that at this time. It may come in the future. But I think it's important for the Senate to know that only 88 attorneys remained in the state of Kansas after becoming licensed in 2023. And that's not enough to handle our 105 counties if every county received 1. And I think that's a pretty drastic statistic, but it shows you how hard it is for those of us to compete with those big companies that are paying a lot of money with great benefits. And we're picking from 88 students, 88 new lawyers that were sworn in and stayed. And that should tell us all what we need. So I will be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time. And I am, and as a KCDAA member, supporting this bill.
Thank you, Susan. Committee, we've got time for a few questions, but keep them brief if you could, because we have one more presenter when this hearing's closed. So, questions? Senator Fagg.
How did we arrive at the $30,000 number? That's question one to the group.
Your mic's not on.
Thank you. How did we arrive at the $30,000 number that, in what the program's asking? How was that arrived at? Does anybody want to try to answer that question?
Yeah, this is Justice Wall. I believe the financial numbers for the tuition repayment program is modeled on just the average cost of tuition in our Kansas law schools. On the other side, on the student loan debt repayment, our data from the committee showed that the average debt load was already starting to exceed $100,000 for rural practitioners that graduated after 2011. And so it seems to parallel the data that we have obtained about the average debt load, and trying to sort of match those two numbers up. Ashley or Ann may have further details if I've overlooked that.
Senator Fagg.
So do we have a shortage of lawyers in the region? You know, is this a problem in other rural states, as far as anybody knows?
Yes, Senator, this is Justice Wall again. Yes, this is not an issue that is unique to Kansas. It is happening across the country. It is an issue nationwide. We are one of the states that I believe are on the leading edge of addressing the issue, but there are other states, including North Dakota and South Dakota, that have implemented similar models that are like the proposed legislation before you and are already starting to realize success through those endeavors. But it is an issue across our country.
Senator Fagg. Is that it? Did you have any more? You're done. Okay. Senator Holscher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is this: we know in the situation where we have a lot of openings that currently aren't filled, it sounds like in some cases we're paying close to 145% of budgeted salary. What we would normally pay if those positions were filled, we're using money to contract. So we're essentially using more money for contracted positions versus actual positions filled. So I guess my question is this sounds like a great program, but I'm also wondering, are we better served, excuse me, by increasing the salary, which I know we've been asked to do? And does it need to be more of a substantial salary? And then if Susan could let me know, you indicated there's 88 attorneys that stayed, out of how many?
125 were sworn in. 88 stayed in Kansas. So the rest of them, a majority went to Missouri, and then there were other outlying states that they relocated to.
Okay.
We
and
also,
then in terms of,
go ahead.
And then I guess I'm trying to see like what helps us more immediately. Programs like this or increasing the salary, or is it a combination?
In my opinion, I think it's a combination. I think the money itself for the existing attorneys, what's happening to us, at least in the prosecution realm, is our cases are lasting 2 to 3 times more than they should be lasting, because we're scheduling around attorneys that are covering, at least in my area, they're covering anywhere from 10 to 15, 16 counties. And so we're trying to schedule around, our judges are trying to schedule around what's happening in the counties around them, which slows down the process. It slows down a defendant being able to talk to his attorney. So I kind of believe, I don't know this for sure, but I would have to believe that if someone is located in our area that's appointed to represent defense that some of the hours, the mileage, some of those things will go down from what's happening now. It'll be spread out among more people, and then it would, I think it would help the justice system move more quickly and be more effective, and we'll have fewer people complaining about the representation, because our attorneys would not be spread as thin.
Thank
would
you.
like to add on to that, though, really quickly, if I may. That only addresses the criminal side of the legal practice when we're talking about government jobs and openings. So the civil practitioners were already drowning. And I would say, I think this was touched on, but weekly, I receive calls from new clients who say, my attorney retired, I need this, I need my estate plan updated, I need something for my business. So it needs to be a combination of both.
Thank you so much.
Senator Petty?
Yes, and I'll make it short. This is for either Ashley, or first of all, I want to say thank you, all of you, for testifying. Promoting as well as the public the importance of having lawyers in our community and what they provide, because unfortunately, I think in today's society, often your profession doesn't get that kind of accolades, so I think that is helpful, and also in the realm of wider professions like the medical profession, and why it would be to get. Here's my question for Ashley: would having this in place, would that have any conflict with the bonus signing program that the Indigent and Defense Lawyers Program has currently to get young lawyers that are young people that are just coming out of law school to commit in the Indigent Defense Program?
Senator Petty, this is Ann Sagan from BIDS. I think that this would actually help us with our assigned counsel program, because in our rural areas, we really rely on local counsel to take appointed cases. And this would bring more counsel to those rural areas that may be interested in taking on BIDS cases. So I see this as a win-win, both for our areas that have public defender offices and also for areas that don't have public defender offices and rely on assigned counsel. And also, in response to the question earlier about whether increasing salaries would help, that would certainly help. And that's a piece of the puzzle. I know that BIDS has received in the past a pay scale adjustment that helped us recruit to many of our offices. But I will say that because the tussle for attorneys is so great, public defenders were quickly outpaced by prosecutors, and their salaries increased in rural areas as well. So salaries are a piece of the puzzle, and we need to continue to raise those. But this is a very important piece as well, and this addresses those assigned counsels who don't have BIDS employee salaries but are taking on appointed cases in rural areas.
And if I can add to that, I'm a former BIDS assigned counsel attorney. When I was in private practice in Fort Scott, I did quite a bit of it. My first 2 years out of my own firm, I did a lot of it. The selling point to lawyers that come down to our area when they want to go out on their own, or they're leaving a firm, or they're straight out of school, is we say, look, go get on the assigned counsel list. It's more stable, guaranteed income. And that's an economic standpoint for a younger attorney. But when you're scared about how do I pay the rent? How do I pay the groceries? Reliably, BIDS will timely process those payments and checks where you don't have to hope that a client's going to pay if their retainer runs out. So I think at times, then it becomes the economics of the assigned counsel rate is so much lower than a normal billable rate that math comes into play. But if you have younger attorneys, that's one, reliable income. Two, it alleviates a lot of the stress on the system because we have more lawyers to take on the cases. It lets them be more successful in their own private practice from the very beginning if they want to be a solo on their own.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, well, we'll close our hearing on Senate Bill 214. Thank all the proponents for being here today. Appreciate it. Committee, there was some written only and no opponents, no neutrals. We're going to close that hearing and we're going to move on. We're going to get a brief update on the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame. They were to report to us on some funding they received. So at this time, I would ask for Richard Konzum. Is that correct? Are you there? Richard, are you still
Okay,
there?
are you hearing me now?
We can now, yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Chairman Bellinger and Vice Chairman Clays and Ranking Member Petty, I've submitted the written testimony. I know we're short on time here. If it's permissible, I'd just summarize by saying thank you for providing the funding to us last year in the legislative session. It's a pleasure to appear before your committee. The Kansas Sports Hall of Fame was created in 1961 by the Kansas Legislature as part of the Kansas Centennial Celebration. You've provided us the funding. We received the funds in November. On that basis, I was hired as a full-time director in September. We had our induction ceremony in Topeka in October. We had the largest crowd at the event we've ever had. We were honored to have Billy Mills provide the welcome, one day short of the 60th anniversary of him winning the gold medal in the Tokyo Olympics as the only American to ever win the 10,000 meters. Since that time in November, we've been moving forward with identifying our biggest needs, one of which is updating our website and getting the message out to Kansans. Our class for induction this year will be on August 2nd, and we're currently in the ballot and nominations stages for that. So the use of the funds were for my salary, the induction ceremony. We're going to establish and enhance our website, establish a marketing and communications platform for the Hall of Fame, create sponsored opportunities so we can generate our own revenue, develop programs. And it's been interesting listening to this session today because we think that our inductees and those people have the platform and the ability to send very strong messages out to Kansans everywhere. Our motto is to honor, to educate, and to inspire. And that's what we're looking to do. Thanks to your funding, we're able to make this happen for Kansans throughout the state. And I'll stand for any questions you have.
Thank you. Questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. I just wondering what your current budget is and how much of the state funding is part of that, and talk about your other sources of revenue.
Well, prior to me becoming the director, we were 2 years without a director because we did not have the funding to hire a director, and our budget was around $50,000. We operate out of the boathouse in Wichita that was provided by Bill Koch to the city of Wichita on the proviso that we would be the group and organization that was housed there. We have used it as an events venue, and so that has been our primary source of revenue. This year, on just the events portion of it, we will have been fortunate after utilities, all the expenses for the events, our insurance, to have cleared $9,000. So that is that piece of it. In the past, we've been making about $9,000 to $10,000 on the induction ceremony. This year, we were able to up that with some more sponsorships and get us to about $30,000. So as you can see, we've not had any funding. Historically, this is the first legislative grant that we've had since 1961. The Hall of Fame was basically not operational until in the mid-90s. And then we relied on the $1 surcharge from the universities, primarily the KU State football game each year and the two basketball games held, also by the other schools identifying a rivalry game. And that was our funding up until about 2005. The universities no longer provide that dollar surcharge. So we were trying to make it on our rental income and our induction ceremony. And then we were crushed by COVID when we went 2 years basically without having any events. So that's where we are.
Other questions? Seeing none. Richard, thank you a lot for the update. We appreciate it, and have a great day. Committee.
Thank you.
Committee, that concludes our work for today. We are adjourned.